Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartiya, and welcome to Let's Talk About Kubernetes. This is a special series of Let's Talk for KubeCon, and my next guest is Grant Shipley, Senior Director of Kubernetes at VMware. Grant, it's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Today, we are going to talk about the Tanzu Community Edition. So, I want to just understand from you what exactly is the VMware Tanzu Community Edition. We'll talk about Tanzu also, but if you want, you can start with Tanzu, and then you can talk about the Community Edition of Tanzu.
Okay, yeah, so great. So Tanzu Community Edition, is kind of, you can think of it as our love letter to the open source community, right? VMware is big into open source, especially around the Kubernetes ecosystem. And a lot of the products that we actually create and ship and sell to customers is based on whether that be upstream open source projects or upstream projects that VMware has initiated, such as Harbor, KPAC, other things like that. In the product editions, like KPAC, for example, we call Tanzu Build Service. And so what we've done, and we're super excited about it, and me especially, is we are taking the upstream equivalents of those product versions and letting anyone download them inside the open source project to really ease the on-ramp to getting started with Kubernetes.
What is if you look at the open source world, this is a very, common pattern we have seen. There is an enterprise edition where people pay to get support, additional feature, and then there's a community edition where people can play with. But if you look at this Tanzu Community Edition, what is the purpose of this? Or is it more or less about getting people started with Tanzu without having to worry about any, money involved? Or it's more or less like, just to give them a taste of Tanzu and then see them convert into users or paying customers. So talk about the goal of this community edition.
Yeah, the goal of Tanzu Community Edition is definitely not to lead people down into a sales funnel. That is not the intention. That's not the goal. What we have seen over the past couple of years as we've been building our core Tanzu products is that in order to be successful with Kubernetes, you need a lot of additional things on top of just installing the base Kubernetes, things like ingress controllers, things like build services, things like registries. And we do believe that Kubernetes is the future platform, not just for operations, but for developers. And installing all of those additional components can get a little unwieldy for developers. And so we wanted to take the experience and the knowledge we've gained over the last couple of years and provide a open source distribution that solves a lot of those problems for people to get started with Kubernetes. And so part of Tanzu Community Edition that I'm most excited about is actually the Carvel packaging system. And so if you or your listeners are familiar with Linux, you know that it's pretty easy to install things on Linux. Same with the Mac OS ecosystem now with Homebrew, and with Linux you have apt-get or DNF, yum. And so Carvel, you can think of in those terms, like you can just say, Tanzu install package certificate registry. And it actually does all of the hard work behind the covers of setting up all the SSL things that a developer would need so they don't have to dive into those details. And so down the road, like if someone is successful, which we hope they will be with Tanzu Community Edition, and they do start deploying it in their enterprise or at their employer's location, it is a very easy switch over to the paid offerings. I'm not gonna say it's not, because it is. It is very easy to switch over. So there is some opportunity for VMware in that regards, but it is not the main intention at all.
As you explained, that it's more or less like your love letter to the community. If I can, and you also, alluded to something, but I just want to go a bit deeper into the tech details, is that what are the components which are common between VMware Tanzu and the Community Edition? And how do you also maintain the cadence? Because Kubernetes, it's released on its own pace, and then you have to keep Tanzu on its pace. So which one is upstream for what?
Yeah, so we will always use the upstream Kubernetes, pure Kubernetes. That's design tenant number one, whether that's in our open source Tanzu Community Edition or in our paid editions. And the big reason for that is we also are a participant in that upstream community, but we also want to take advantage of what the community is creating. And so the main design tenet was to be 100% upstream Kubernetes. The most frustrating thing an operator or a developer can go through, and I've been through this many times, is Googling how to do something in Kubernetes. You find an answer, take it to your distribution, and it doesn't work because of subtle differences between the two. And so being pure Kubernetes is very important to us. But to answer your question, I think, are we a little bit delayed? Yes, because we take the base Kubernetes and then we test and validate. We're not far behind, but we do a lot of testing and validation of the additional packages. Make sure Carvel, excuse me, works correctly, Cert Manager works correctly, Harbor is still working, Build Service is still working, all of these additional packages that are included inside of Tanzu Community Edition.
Excellent. And but the second question that I asked was more or less like, if you look at the Tanzu, the paid or enterprise edition and the community edition, is there, this Tanzu is upstream for this, like in other words, we have seen Fedora or, Tumbleweed. So that's also one of the, where does the development happen? Does it happen internally at VMware and then you release off for Tanzu and then you also split it as a developer community edition, or you use the community edition to do all the testing, all the new features, and then they, trickle down, or, but Tanzu becomes a downstream for that. That's what I was trying to understand.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the Fedora CentOS Red Hat model. For sure. So we do all of our development in the upstream projects. And so almost every single component of either the paid offering or the community edition, 100% in the community edition case, is the upstream project. So we do all of our work around Tanzu Build Service in the KPAC upstream project. And then we take that and we include it in the editions. And so they are always very, very close to each other. I wouldn't say one's further ahead than the other at this point.
The reason I wanted to ask that question was, as you earlier mentioned, that if you are using the community edition, you can very easily move to the paid version if you want to move into production. So do you, how easy is that process, or does VMware, your teams help people migrate their workload? It's just like as easy as just clicking on a button or running some commands?
Yeah, I know in our industry, we like to say things are always single click, very easy to do. In reality, nothing is that way. And so it is I'm not going to say it's magic, because it's not, right? But we do certainly help people. The transition going from Tanzu Community Edition to one of our paid offerings should be minimal in effort. It's not no effort, right? Nothing is no effort. But it is a lot easier than going from base Kubernetes to EKS or to some other distribution of Kubernetes. It should be pretty seamless, but I can't promise there's no effort there.
One more thing that I want to ask you is, and this could be out of the scope of the discussion, is that if you look at the use cases for Kubernetes these days, it's almost everywhere. As there used to be a joke about, hey, Linux is powering my toaster, Kubernetes will be doing same. So if you look at some of the use cases, especially in the edge space, how prepared is the community edition to handle those use cases, or it's meant especially for certain use cases?
It's meant for both, but it's also meant for people to come up with new ideas on how to use it. So with Tanzu Community Edition, you can run it in a single node configuration, which could be a small edge deployment, maybe in a vending machine somewhere if you wanted to, or it could run the largest enterprise companies in the world. Like, there's no difference between Tanzu Community Edition and our highest paid Tanzu offering as far as features, functionality goes, and where you can run it and where you can't run it. We could get into a whole nother discussion on whether or not Kubernetes is suitable for a lot of these edge cases, like in the vehicles. Will we ever see containers powering autonomous vehicles or something? I don't know. But Tanzu Community Edition and the Tanzu products are well suited, and we do test against both the edge use cases as well as large enterprise deployments.
One challenge with the Community Edition is that you are on your own. You have a lot of questions. You are looking for troubleshooting. So As part of the community edition, do you only offer the code, or is there also a community where people can go and ask questions or get their issues resolved within the community, or they have to go and check online on their own?
Yeah, so I would hope that people don't feel like they're on their own. That's the point of community. As soon as you release a new open source project, the community is small, right? It's generally made up of the people who worked on the project. And so that's kind of the state we're in now. We have seen a lot of adoption and downloads of Tanzu Community Edition in the last couple of weeks, but that community is still growing. Now, how does a company and a project sponsored by VMware help with that effort? Yeah, certainly we'll get in and start seeding discussions and helping out in the community, making sure people are successful. The last thing we want is for people to download Tanzu Community Edition, not be able to find the answers that they need online. But you're 100% right. It is a community support model. VMware, you will not be able to call Tanzu or VMware to talk to someone on the phone unless you do have a paid subscription to one of our products.
This may be a kind of awkward question, but because I don't believe that you can manage a community, or you can, you can curate a community, you can help a community, but is it also in your, kind of, radar somewhere to build a platform like, as we have seen a lot of forums are there, other in modern times, there are different platforms altogether. Slack is there, other things. So how do you plan to also facilitate communities so that if they do have issues, they can fall, or are you going to leave it entirely up to the community that they can come up with the solutions to either build forums or whatever they want?
No, we will initially help out and be that community initially, right? And point people to whether it be Reddit or the official Tanzu Community Edition Slack channel on the Kubernetes Slack. And our goal is to, as people have questions, help them with the answer to that question, in the hopes that when someone else has the question, they can then become part of that community and help other people out. It's not going to happen overnight. Something like this takes a very long time, a year or multiple years, to build a true community around something, but it doesn't happen magically. Like, we will definitely have to start building the initial inroads into that. And then, once the community is more involved, then it will be the community's decision. Maybe they don't want to use the Kubernetes Slack. Maybe they want to use Stack Overflow or some other medium as the official community support channel. That'll be up to the community at that point.
Let's go back to some basics. Is that if there is somebody who wants to try Tanzu Community Edition, how they get started, and also what kind of people are you targeting that, hey, this is ideal for these kind of people?
Yeah, so to get started with Tanzu Community Edition, you just go to our website, or you can go directly to GitHub, and you can download the Tanzu CLI, which you can then install Tanzu Community Edition from. It only takes a few minutes. You can do it on the command line, or you can use a UI. It's a pretty nice experience. We are targeting both infrastructure and developer audiences with this open source project. So predominantly anyone who wants to run workloads or even just learn about Kubernetes. One of the efforts that we released alongside of Tanzu Community Edition is learn.tanzu.io, which is an interactive learning portal that VMware has built just to teach people how to use Kubernetes. We also have Kubernetes by example. So our goal is, for this edition, is both the experienced practitioners of Kubernetes looking for a distribution that they can seamlessly move to a enterprise supported product if they need to, as well as individuals who just want to learn and start using Kubernetes.
I just quickly want to talk about Carvel. Packaging system is that this is a totally different word, the Kubernetes or cloud native word, but how do you get packages in there? Can people submit it, the package in there? Can they, if you look at, you compare with app image and everything else, where the project maintainers, they go and they can create their own app images. So how does things work in Carvel system? Are you managing the packages, or anybody can contribute packages there?
So that's one of the things I like most about Carvel is, again, we've learned a lot of things from Linux and how well packaging systems works on Linux. So we have package repositories, right? And so with Tanzu Community Edition, you can subscribe to the Tanzu package repository, which includes things like the cert manager and DNS extensions. But users can also create and publish their own packages in their own repositories and then subscribe to those from their Tanzu Community Edition. And so one of the big things you'll see coming from us over the next little bit is VMware acquired Bitnami about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, who are world renowned for their packaging efforts, both for Kubernetes with Helm charts as well as for virtual machines. So starting to create more and more packages based around the Carvel system. But yes, our goal and intention is for anyone to be able to quickly and easily create a Kubernetes package that can be installed with the Carvel toolset.
Grant, thank you so much for taking time out today and talk about the Tanzu Community Edition. And also, we went a bit deeper into the community aspect and open source aspect of it. So thanks for your insights, and I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you.